This video covers another important aspect of computer maintenance, specifically tools that you can use to speed up your computer, remove unwanted files, fix errors on your hard disk, fix errors in your registry, look for spyware, adware, and other things you don't want on your computer, and generally optimize your computer to make it run more efficiently. And this is particularly important for computers that have been around for a year or two. Now, some of you may already be running a utility. I've actually seen people have 3 or 4 utilities on their machine. Sometimes there are utilities that people have bought from a store like Norton System Utilities, and sometimes they're utilities that people have downloaded off the internet, and sometimes it's a combination of both. Generally speaking, you should really try to find one utility that does almost everything, if not everything, that you need, and that's what I'm going to show you in this video. The other thing is that you really want to avoid running multiple instances of the same type of software on your machine, particularly if they do things automatically, because that's really going to slow down your machine, because you could find 2 or 3 of them running at the same time, and it's simply not an efficient way to manage a machine. Another thing to keep in mind is that if you've purchased the software from a retail store, you're getting 100% of the functionality. Like if you bought Norton System Utilities, you're getting everything, and they may offer additional stuff that you can buy, but you probably don't need it. On the other hand, if you've downloaded something like CC Cleaner from the internet, and you've never bought the paid-for upgrade for it, you're only getting a small percentage of what that tool is capable of. Basically, what they've done is given you a teaser, and I know a lot of people who are running that and maybe 1 or 2 other utilities that they're just using the free versions of, thinking that they're actually getting everything they need, and they're really not, nowhere near it. They're getting at best 50, maybe 60% of the capabilities of those tools. So you definitely want to, whatever utility you run, if you download it from the internet, get the fully paid for version, because then you will be getting 100% of the capabilities of that particular tool. I've looked at lots of tools in the 25 years that I've been using computers, and in the last year or so, I've hit on one that I'm quite pleased with. It typically ranks anywhere from 3rd to 5th in reviews of PC Magazine and some of the other review places that you can research this type of software. And I've looked at the ones that they list as 1 and 2, and to be honest, I don't find them to be any better. I don't like the interfaces as well. It's very much a matter of personal preference. So I'm going to walk you through here installing the version of utility that I use on all my computers. I find it quite sufficient, and it's not particularly expensive. The one thing you want to make sure that you do before you install this utility is uninstall any other utilities that you've got, like CC Cleaner or any others. Again, if you've got Norton or something that you paid for from a store, then you probably don't need to watch this video, because you've already got a pretty good program running on your machine. But if you're using anything you've downloaded from the internet, you want to watch this video. And if you're not using anything at all, you definitely want to watch this video. So I'm going to go through and show you just quickly on Windows 7 how to initiate the uninstall process if you have some that you need to uninstall. So you go down to the Start button, and this is Windows 7, and you're going to have Control Panel. Now, if you're using a different version of Windows, the way you get at Control Panel might be a little different, but it always starts with the Start button. Then you go to Control Panel, and again, the view you get of Control Panel is going to differ depending on your operating system. It's going to differ on how you've set up your computer. Some people have icons here, some people do that. I don't really like those. Some people have a folder opening up. This is how I prefer it right here. I like the categories. I find it very easy to find what I want. And we go down here in Windows 7 and choose Uninstall the program. If you're using any other operating system, version of Windows operating system, or you have your computer set up in a slightly different way, you'll just have to look around until you find the Uninstall the program option. And we click on it. Now, on some machines, this can actually take 2 or 3 minutes to bring up a list of all the programs, depending on how old and slow your machine is, and depending on how many programs you've got installed. I don't personally have anything right now that I want to uninstall, but I can give you an example of what you would do to uninstall something if you did have something to uninstall. So I'm just going to, well, I take that back. We've got Skype Click to Call here, which I know I never use, and that must have gotten installed the last time I upgraded my Skype. So we'll go ahead and select that. And in Windows 7, the uninstall is up here. In other versions of Windows, it's kind of over here to the right a bit. But you'll find it. And we click uninstall. You get a little message saying, do you really want to do this? And you answer yes. And then you get this other message that kicks off the uninstaller. Now sometimes your uninstaller will require you to reboot, which is kind of annoying, but it is what it is. I know for a fact that this one won't require us to reboot. Now another thing to be aware of is this is your operating system, user account control, saying somebody's trying to make a change to this computer, and it might be suspicious. Do you want to carry on doing this? Now usually the name is pretty specific, Skype click to call. The verified publisher is Skype, and the file origin's on the hard drive of this computer. Sometimes these messages are a little bit more ambiguous. So the general rule of thumb is, if one of these messages pops up pretty soon after you've initiated another activity, you can pretty well guarantee that it's related to the activity that you initiated. On the other hand, if you're off checking your email or doing something that has nothing to do with installing or uninstalling software or making any changes to your computer, and you see one of these messages pop up, you definitely want to click no, because you have no idea why that started. And if you get that reoccurring a lot, please bring your computer into the computer lab at the St. George Senior Citizen Center Computer Lab, and hopefully we can recreate the problem and maybe help you fix it. If not, we know some people who can. Anyhow, we're going to click yes, and we're going to wait for this uninstall to go through. It'll just take a second or two. It's not a very big program. Okay, and it's done. And unfortunately, we didn't have to reboot. So we'll close that. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to assume that we've cleaned off all of those other utilities on our machine that we don't want to use anymore, and we're going to focus on this other utility that I've been talking about. We're going to go to a browser. I use Mozilla. You can use whatever browser you want. It doesn't matter. Let me make it a little bigger so you can see it. And the other thing that I'm going to show you, a lot of people in Google will start typing in site names and stuff down here in search. Now you can do that. It's a little bit haphazard. If you actually know the URL you need to go to, and in this case you're going to because I'm going to tell you, the better thing to do is to actually go up here to the address bar and type the URL in manually. The URL is www.iobit.com. So that is I for Indiana, O for I for Indiana, O for Oscar, B for Bravo, I for Indiana, T for town.com. The other thing you want to do is move your cursor over to the right so that the text is not highlighted, and then press the Enter key. Now the way they have their set up right now, what we want to buy is, or download, and then we'll activate the version we downloaded, is actually on their main screen. So this is kind of handy. But they also offer another way to get it, which is you go to Products, just click on Products, and you go down here. Now you want to get the free version because you want to play with it and see if you're comfortable with it and you like the interface and that sort of thing. And then you can go and license it later. You don't need to do a reinstall. The minute you put the license in, it activates all the functions that weren't activated when you had the unlicensed version. So interesting enough, if you go at it this way, they take you over to a different site. You get this big green free download button, and it looks pretty much the same as the previous one. But then you click on it, and it takes you over to CNET. Now CNET is a very, very common place to download software. It is safe and secure. However, a lot of companies, software companies, pay CNET to bury their utilities and tools and other things in the CNET installer, so that when you click this download now, and then you start to run it, if you're not very, very careful, you'll find that it's changing your search engine, it's installing toolbars, it's maybe trying to install some virus software, and lots of other things. You just have to be extremely careful to decline anything that is not Advanced System Care Pro. So we're not going to use this option right now because the other option is still available. But if the other option goes away, then this will be the option that you have to use. And as you said, you'd have to be very careful to make sure that you're only installing System Care Pro. And again, if you have any concerns about doing this whatsoever, come into the computer lab. We'll help you. So let's go back to the home page. We're going to click the download button. And interestingly enough, this just goes to Save File. So we're going to left click on Save File. Now Mozilla has a neat little utility here. It's got a down arrow. and you click on it. Sometimes you have to click a couple of times, and you can click Show All Downloads. And it shows you that the installers come down, and we're all done and we're ready to go. So we don't need the browser anymore. We're going to minimize that, and we're going to bring this over. Now, I'm assuming you know where your computer downloads things when you click on them from a browser. But if you don't, in Windows 7, you go to Computer, and there's actually a download area right here. And some other versions of Windows actually have a similar function so that you can go there and find it. And I could actually run this program from right here if I wanted to. But I'm not going to do that because I'm going to do what most people do. And that is I'm going to run it from the download library. So I'm going to use my left mouse button and double click on it. And again, you're going to get this little, hey, something's going on here. Do I want this to happen? And we're going to answer yes because, yeah, we started it. We know what's going on. I'm going to get rid of this box in the back. We don't need it anymore. Okay, so we want to, again, be very careful to look at the screen and make sure it's not going to install something we don't want. So right now, basically, it's saying, click here to configure advanced settings if you do not want to use the default settings. So if you click on that, there's really not a lot there. So there's really no reason to use it. But anyhow, having clicked there, I'm not going to make any changes. And they don't really give you a way to go back, so we'll just accept and install. Now here's the tricky bit. They're being paid by a company called Spigot to bury a toolbar in your browser that gives you one-click access to lots of other things. And they give you this big, bright blue accept and install. And 99% of people would just jump on this button. We don't want this toolbar. At least I don't. You may. And notice the decline is down here in very little print. So we would decline this. But let's start this process over because I want to show you a clean run through it where we don't go through and try to change the installer options. So I'm going to click the X, and are you sure you want to cancel? And we're going to say yes. And we'll go back to the browser. We'll go back to Show Downloads. We'll minimize the browser again. We'll double click on this again. We're getting back to where we were a minute ago. And we're going to answer yes. We're going to close that. And you should recognize the screen because we were just here a little bit ago. And we're going to do accept and install. This is the same screen I just told you about before. It wants to put the toolbar on. We don't want the toolbar. We click decline. Now, what you originally brought down was what they call a stub file. You didn't actually bring down the entire application. This is pretty typical these days that companies do this. And so now it's actually bringing down a 21 megabyte file, technically speaking. And you don't want to minimize it to the system tray. Just let it run. It doesn't take that long. I generally am not a big fan of multitasking while you're installing software. I find that makes it way too easy to make mistakes. So we'll just sit here and let this run. It won't take too long. Okay, and we're finished. Now the next thing it does is bring up just a very quick little tutorial. It's got 5 screens here, and you just click through them. It's got these 2 different modes. Surfing protection is pretty cool. If you're browsing and you go to a site that's got malicious software, it will warn you so that you don't click on a link that does something malicious to your computer. We've got performance monitor, registry fix, and some things like that. So we're going to click start now. And give me just a second because it's off doing something. And I need to rearrange my screen a little bit here so you can see what's going on. So what's happened here, and this only recently started happening, is that the version that they've actually linked to their website is actually a little bit out of date. And so what they're giving me now is an option to go ahead and update the software right now to the latest version. And I could do that, but I've installed this software many times, and I've only just recently started seeing this. So I'm going to assume that you probably aren't going to see this by the time you get around to watching this video. So I don't want to do this video in a way that most of the time you're not going to be doing. On the other hand, if you do happen to see this, it would be good to know what to do. So you want to select this option here and this option here do not select Smart Defrag Pro, and at any time that Advanced System Care comes up and says, hey, we'd really like you to install Smart Defrag Pro, don't do it. It comes from a third party, it also has things buried in it, and it really isn't that much better than the one that they give you, so there's absolutely no reason to do that. So if I was going to use this option to take this automatic update as it occurs right now, I would simply click install. It would close the version that's running, it would replace the version that's running with this version, and then it would start it up. But we don't want to do that because, as I said, most of you probably aren't going to see this screen. So let's go back to what most of you are going to see. So we're going to click that X, and we're back to what most of you are going to see. So the first thing we want to do here is we want to enable everything. So this turns on all the various features. Okay? And right now, I could just click the scan button, and it would go off and do the scan and do all these things. So I'm going to do that now. And this is very critical. You always want to select automatically repair. Now the good news, you only have to select that once and it stays selected. And it's going to run through and it's going to do all these things. But remember, we're not using the paid for version, so it's not going to do all of these 100%. Okay, so we're going to stop that because this can take up to half an hour, particularly if it's a machine that hasn't had something like this run on it for a while. So we'll click stop and we're back here. We're going to go through some settings you need to change. And one thing you want to do here is activate all functions, and then you want to turn off auto care by clicking on it and turning it off. I'm sorry, I take that back. You want auto care on, you want auto clean off, because you don't want it doing it at boot up. It'll slow down the process. So just to recap, auto care you want on, auto clean you want off. Now we're going to go to all settings. And we're going to go through these fairly quickly. You pick the first one, and we want to remove threats to the recycle bin, and we want to enable full detection. So we click apply. Anytime you make a change on any of these screens, click apply. Enable deep clean, apply. Privacy sweep. I don't like it to get rid of typed URLs. I do like to get rid of cookies. I don't like to get rid of history. If you don't know what you're doing here, accept the defaults and move on, and come into the computer lab and we'll help you out. Definitely want to get rid of the cache here. Download history is good. And we'll get rid of cookies here. I don't know what the session thing does. I'll have to go read the manual. But it's on by default, so I'm going to leave it on. Then we click apply. Chunk file clean. The only thing I change here is I like it to empty the recycle bin and I like it to clean up Windows error reporting. Secure file delete. If you have files on your computer like bank statements and things like that that somebody could, if they got a hold of your computer, could resurrect, even if you deleted those files, then you may want to enable this, but it does take a little longer to delete the files. So most people don't really need this, but you should keep in mind that when you delete a file from your computer, you don't actually delete the file, you delete a pointer to the file. The file itself remains until the next time your computer needs to use that disk space. That's how people are able to recover deleted files. So we're not going to enable this particular feature, but we did make a couple of changes here, so we'll click apply. System optimization. I think everybody is a top performance home user, so I would select that. Network optimization, you're basically going to have two options. If your computer is wired directly to your router or modem, you're going to click LAN. If, on the other hand, you're using wireless, you're going to click wireless. Then you click apply. Vulnerability fix, nothing to change there. Disk defragment. Enable optimization defragment, yes. Apply. Automatic service. Care for your system when it's idle. So we want to do that and accept the defaults and apply. Auto clean. We do not want to do that at boot up. We actually turned that off earlier, which is why it's not checked there. Auto update. We definitely want the tool to auto update the software itself. So you don't have to worry about that. So remember that whole update thing that we started off here where it wanted us to do an update? This function will take care of that and we don't have to worry about it anymore. So we've enabled that. Again, we have to click apply. Surfing protection, that's on by default, nothing to do there. Active optimize is on by default, nothing to do there. Ignore list, you don't need to play with this. User interface, I accept the defaults. Login backup, defaults. Notifications, defaults. So basically we're done here and we click OK. So the only thing left to do here is if we want to run the licensed version, we have to manage the license. So we're going to click Manage License. Okay. Now on this computer, I've had this software installed before. So it picked up the license from the registry key that it left behind, even though I had actually uninstalled the software. So I'm not going to be able to show you exactly how you would go about licensing your software, but it is relatively straightforward. What you would have instead of what you're seeing here is you would see an upgrade button here and then an enter license thing over here. So you would click the upgrade button. That would take you to their website. And once you're at their website, you can then pay for the software using a credit card or PayPal or whatever. And they give you the offer to download the software again. You don't need to download it again. You already have it, so don't do that. The next thing you're going to wait for is an email from them because it's going to have your activation key. So I'm going to go to my email, and it's here. And I store my names in my email. That's kind of bad, but I'm the only person who uses this computer, so it's no big deal. Okay, now, one thing to be clear on is that the sender is going to be Avangate Customer Service, but the subject line is going to be Advanced System Care Pro. Okay, so don't be too surprised when you see this. You click on that. The first thing you're going to see is the link to download the software. Well, you've already got it downloaded and installed, so you don't need to do that. What you need is this here. This is the critical piece of the whole puzzle. That's your license code. So you highlight it by using the left mouse button, clicking and dragging. That highlights the whole thing. Now there's a couple of different ways that you can copy it to the clipboard so that you can reuse it. And of course you could always print this if you wanted to type it in by hand. You can right-click copy, you can edit copy, you can shift insert, or you can do Control-C. They all work the same, and you may know of some way I don't even know of. So I'm just going to minimize that for now, and then we're going to go back to Manage License. And as I said, what would happen when you did Manage License, instead of seeing this screen, you're going to see a slightly different screen, and it's actually going to appear down here below the tool itself. And it's going to have a licensed text area here. It's basically an open area where you can paste the license into. You would click your cursor into that, and then you would paste the license in by doing something like edit paste or whatever your preferred option is for pasting. And then you would click activate, and it would activate it, and you would then have the full version of the software running. So basically, we're completely set up now. My license was already there, so I didn't have to do the licensing. Again, if you have any questions on the licensing and getting that working, do come into the lab. And what you want to do then, once you've paid for your license, is go ahead and run a scan. And then go off and have a cup of coffee and see what happens. The way the scans work is that it goes through first and finds errors, and then it fixes them, and then it gives you a report about what it did. You don't really want it to shut down the PC, but maybe you started this just before you went to bed, and you want it to shut down the PC when it's done because you're going to be asleep and you don't need your computer. Then shut down the PC might be a reasonable thing to do. So I'm going to click stop here because this can actually take quite a while. Now, remember we talked a little bit about the fact that it's going to do some auto cleaning. So it will do auto cleaning while your system is idle, but you still need to periodically, once a week or so, come up and run a full scan. So that's something that you just kind of need to put on your calendar. So there are a couple of ways to start this tool. One of them is just go down here to the Start button, and it actually puts itself right here in the Start menu, so you can click on it there. The other way would be All Programs, Advanced System Care 6. Now when you do it this way, you're going to get this message, and you're going to click Yes, and it's going to come up. Now the other way to start it, which is a little easier, bear with me for a second while I move something, is down here in your taskbar system tray area, you've got this little, it looks like a C in a black circle, and it says Advanced System Care. If you click on that one, you don't get the yes, I want to do this thing. It just starts it off. So good old Microsoft, they can't be consistent if they try. Either way, it starts it, and it's fine. And then you would run your full scan. And as I said, we have it set up for auto update, so that will take care of the updates. If you want the user manual, it's actually right here, and it's a browser page that you can print off. Right there, I'm not going to print it. And that will give you everything you need to know about it. Settings is also available from here, because like most programs, they offer multiple ways to do exactly the same thing, just to confuse you. check for updates. So let's say even though you have it set up for automatic update, maybe it hasn't done it recently, and you'd say, geez, I really want it to update. So it's going off and getting update information. Okay? And this is that screen we saw when we first started. So I'm not going to do that right now. We have a couple of other things to do before we finish this video. Toolbox has a few other things that don't get run when you're doing the scan, and these are tools that you really need to read the manual to understand better. Some of them are done by default by the scan, others of them are tools that you can use for other reasons. Turbo Boost I don't play with on this computer because it has a CPU Turbo Boost mode, so I don't need it. If you want to play with Turbo Boost, bring your computer in, we'll turn it on, turn it off, and we'll see what your computer does. Now, Action Center. Here's where your computer is going to be a little different than mine because remember, mine came up pre-licensed. Yours is going to have two options here. One is IOBit Malware Fighter, not Pro, and it's going to have a little thing here that says Fix. Then underneath it, it's going to say something defrag. I think it's IOBit defrag, and it's going to say Fix for that as well. Both of those are free. You just click on Fix, let it run, and eventually those two additional bits of software will be installed. Why they don't include it in the base edition, I don't really understand. It's just how they choose to do it. If you want to use the Pro version, that's fine. It'll cost you another $5. I do it on some of my machines. I haven't done it on this one. So you definitely, before you run your first scan, to do a complete tidy up, you want to go ahead and go to the Action Center and you want to do those two things, which is Fix and Fix. But those are free and they just take care of themselves. And that pretty much completes this video. You've learned about everything I can teach you about this tool without you actually having to come in. As I said, there's different modes. You can go to simplified mode if you prefer that. And they give these little tips here, and then you can say, yep, got that. And you can just do that. And again, you have Action Center, which is what we just showed you. And again, you would have those two fix things there. I like expert mode. Totally up to you. So this concludes the video, and do please feel free to stop into our lab at any time for additional support.